Okay, we good to go? Yeah. All right. So hi everybody, welcome. Um, so once again, in the context of our collaboration between Climate Reality Project and Writers Collective of Canada, today we will be speaking about antibiotics and pesticides in the context of agriculture. Not a light subject, but we'll try to make it very understandable. Next slide, Lena. So yeah, that's it. It's once again in the collaboration between Writers Collective Canada and Climate Reality Project Canada. We will be recording. It is recording now. So if you want to turn off your camera, feel free to do so. If there are any questions, let them in. You could put them in the chat. And that being said, yeah, here we go.
Beautiful. So hello and welcome to our virtual workshop. Just a couple of housekeeping things to go by Zoom. So the mute button, please turn off your phones and background radios and TVs, etc. And please mute yourself when not speaking. Also, in terms of the video, if you need to step away, please turn off your video and please face the camera while talking. And also feel free to use the chat button to message to the moderators and also put your feedback of the writing if you're not wish to verbally put your feedback. So I'm just going to go around the room to do the short introduction. So it will go off the first name and personal pronouns and also the city that we're writing from. And also today's icebreaker question, that is, what's your favorite holiday food? Okay, I'm just going to go first. So hi, my name is Hasib. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm writing from Toronto, Canada. And my favorite holiday food would be pizza. Thank you very much. Okay, Marika, would you mind to the honors?
Yeah, hi, my name's Marika. I'm also with WCC. My pronouns are she and her. I'm writing from Toronto, and a favorite holiday food would definitely be some sort of stuffed squash.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jamie, would you mind going next, please?
Yeah, with pleasure. So I'm Jamie Latvedis, pronouns he, him. I am right now in Montreal, but I'm from a small town called Hemmingford. My favorite holiday food is probably going to be tourtière. I don't know if there's an English translation for it, like meat pie or mince pie, maybe. But yeah, that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Devon, would you mind?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, my name's Devon. I go by she, her, and I'm currently in Sun Peaks, which is this little mountain village in BC. Oh, and my favorite holiday food is mince pies, like the raisins.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Shirley, would you mind?
Yeah, hi, I'm Shirley, she, her pronouns. I'm in Montreal. My favorite holiday food is latkes, specifically the ones my mom makes.
Okay, of course, yes. Thank you. And Michelena, finally, do you mind?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Michelina. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm writing from Tiohtià:ke, commonly known as Montreal. And my favorite holiday food is specifically stuffing from the turkey. Like, I don't really like the turkey that much, but the stuffing, so good.
Beautiful. I'm going to pick up people from the box. So, Misha, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Oh, hi. Sorry, I'm just coming into this, but yeah, my name is Misha Whitcock. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Climate Reality Project, and I'm the Northern Engagement Coordinator.
Beautiful. And your favorite holiday food?
Oh, I'm going to say pampishke, which is a Ukrainian donut.
Yeah, thank you
And
very much.
I guess, the city, I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of Carcross-Tagus First Nation, which is closer to Whitehorse, Yukon.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing, Misha. Okay, Bob Petrusa, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Bob. I'm from New Westminster, BC, on the unceded territories of the Cookite First Nations. I'm with the Climate Reality Leaders. And I like pizza. For those of you who are European bent, it's a nut roll with honey.
Honey pizza, beautiful. Thank you. Caroline, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Burke. I'm currently in Ontario while my house is being restored from a flood in Newfoundland, which is where I'm living normally. And I'm a climate reality leader for the last few years. Let's see. Pronouns, I'll answer to any. I haven't really figured out which ones I prefer yet. And my favorite food is ice cream any time of the year.
Thank you. Thank
Nice
you,
to meet
Caroline.
you all.
Nice to meet you too. And I see finally Samantha. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Well, so, I'm Samantha. I'm just out of the store right now. I'm writing from Toronto, Ontario. I just saw this workshop being advertised about climate change, and I'm interested in the topic and exploring more through my writing. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess that's everyone. And we can just move on to the next one.
So before we begin, I'll share a land acknowledgement, as we want to honor the history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land by the Indigenous people in the vast and beautiful country that we now know as Canada. We seek to live in respect, peace, and right relations with them as we live and work upon their traditional territory. We are mindful of broken covenants and believe that in all our actions, we must contribute to the healing and decolonizing journey that we share. At the heart of First Nations culture is storytelling, and that's also what brings us here together today.
So before we start, a bit about Climate Reality Project Canada. So we are under a charity status in Canada. The Climate Reality Project is a pretty large international organization that has branches in a bunch of different countries. We initially sort of specialized in training people to learn how to communicate, articulate the concepts of climate change so that we could sort of self-educate and spread that knowledge. And slowly now we're going into empowering community organizations so that they could go and reach and obtain that change within their municipal governments, provincial governments, or even federal governments. So we're all about empowering citizens and using that democratic tool that we have in our country. And like the last sentence says there, we empower people like our world depends on it, because it indeed does.
And a bit about Writers Collective of Canada. We are a small charitable organization as well, focusing on arts health, and we provide free exploratory writing workshops, and we strive to serve traditionally underserved and underheard communities. So we believe that everyone who writes is a writer, and that everyone's story should be heard. So here we're gonna have an opportunity to educate ourselves and then kind of reflect back and write to the subject we are exploring today, antibiotics and pesticides. And then we'll be able to kind of bring that creative expression into the topic as well. So happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
And in our objective today, we aim to learn, discover, and reflect, learn about the concerns that are surrounding pesticides and antibiotics, discover more largely the way our food contributes to a larger climate issue, a climate crisis, and how agriculture is both a source but also a victim of this larger issue. And lastly, we aim to reflect on our growing disconnect with what is on our plate and what is required to get it there. Now, maybe a quick brief introduction. My name is Jamie Latvedis, and yes, I am the Regional Engagement Coordinator for Quebec for Climate Reality Project Canada, but I'm also a farmer. I come from a small town called Hemmingford, and I am co-running my own farm for the past 5 years now. We do regenerative farming. So what I'm going to tell you guys today is going to be both by personal experience, but also quite a bit of research, because we adopted our means and methods based on the problems out there in the world. So as we probably observed or noticed, agriculture has changed in the past hundreds and even thousands of years. With the growth of population comes the growth of demand, and by consequence, the necessary adaptation of agricultural methods to tend to that rising demand. We had to change agriculture, which meant that we needed to change and meet certain obstacles that nature then put in our way. For example, if we want to increase density of production and put a bunch of crops in the greenhouse to increase production, well, we're going to quickly notice that close proximity, that lack of air circulation, and that poor, more humid climate, well, it creates more disease, for example. So it isn't just simply, hey, let's produce more, and nature says, okay, come on down. We're sort of meeting with a back and forth, like a dialogue between nature and humanity's demands. You go to the next slide, please. Now, the way we sort of decided to adapt to those obstacles that nature put in our way, well, they're multifaceted, right? There's a bunch of different ways to meet those demands. And being as we are sometimes quite ingenious about the way we want to overcome those obstacles. So the two that we're talking about today is antibiotics and pesticides. Now, firstly, antibiotics. By trying to meet this large demand, that growing demand that humanity requires in terms of food, livestock raising has changed quite a bit. We often sort of increase densification, putting more and more animals in smaller spaces to get more from them, which means a lot of individual animals in small spaces with poor air circulation, often very poor hygiene. And nature responded by showing us that, no, we can't simply do that. That's going to increase diseases, bacteria, and we eventually lost livestock, and production kind of didn't increase at the rate that we were hoping for. And our response to that was antibiotics. So instead of spacing out animals, instead of opening up spaces and increasing hygiene, we found a more meticulous, or say sophisticated way of counteracting that obstacle. Now, what is an antibiotic? It's a beautiful invention that came up to especially help human with bacteria and diseases or infections. It's meant, antibiotic is antibiotic being life, anti being counter, so it's anti-life essentially. And it was meant to kill bacteria or infections. It can do that in two different ways. There is what we call a static antibiotic or a cidal antibiotic. Static being that it would stop the bacteria or infection in its tracks by stopping DNA production, stopping enzyme or protein production, stuff like that. When we're talking about cidal antibiotics, we're talking about antibiotics that are meant to essentially kill the infection or bacteria by destroying the cell wall, for example. So it's quite sophisticated science, and we started using it for humans to counter infections, stuff like that. And some of you have probably used antibiotics before. And now in terms of livestock, the way we use this, when we notice infections coming in livestock, we couldn't, of course, test animals one by one to treat them individually. It wouldn't be efficient. So what we started doing is sort of mass force feeding animals antibiotics within their food routinely. So we'd be giving low doses of antibiotics to massive populations of livestock. This, of course, has consequence. One simple consequence that we noticed is that animals would grow faster because of antibiotics. Scientists are not really sure of why this happens, but we think it's because since it changed the bacteria gut, the bacteria in the animal's guts, it would change the way we digest or sort of absorb nutrients, and would make absorption a lot quicker, unnaturally fast, which is sometimes we see videos of chickens not being able to support their own weight. The same goes for pigs and stuff like that. That is because of some sort of unnatural growth that could be caused by antibiotics or other growth hormones. But another more important consequence of this is the creation of what we call superbugs. So when we see an infection in an animal, we give it an antibiotic, and we'd hope that an infection would go away. But it's not the case. In fact, 80% of the time, that bacteria or that infection would sort of learn to adapt to the antibiotic. They would become what we call drug-resistant bacteria. And so that is another obstacle that nature put in our way. We tried to increase livestock production. We noticed infections. We gave animals antibiotics. Nature reacted by adapting, creating what we call superbugs. And so naturally, humans just created stronger antibiotics or different antibiotics or giving higher doses, which in turn just created stronger superbugs. And a dangerous thing about these superbugs is that it's essentially super bacteria that are very often quite dangerous for animals, but also humans. And these superbugs are highly contagious and could sort of travel through the food chain. So if somebody were to consume, say, pork that would be contaminated with these superbugs, they could easily ingest the superbug. So this vicious cycle that we're trying to force upon animals is fighting back, and it's hurting a lot of people. The World Health Organization, as well as the CDC, the UK Health Administration, they all consider superbugs to be a major human threat to human health. Sorry. Right now, it's killing about hundreds of thousands of people in the world, but it's predicted to reach about 10 million people per year by 2050, which would be more than cancer is today. So yeah, we give it the next slide. That is the subject of antibiotics. Now we're going to talk about pesticides. So again, by trying to meet this large demand from humanity, we had to increase the size of our fields. We also adopted monoculture. And the reaction from nature was that, well, it sent a bunch of bugs and pests because we're not the only ones interested in these crops. And when initially we sort of adapted to these bugs by crop rotation and stuff like that, in time we noticed that it wasn't efficient. There would be more efficient ways to deal with these pests, and that was chemicals. A pesticide is a bit easier to define. It's essentially just poison. It's meant to kill. There are a bunch of different kinds of pesticides. We use the word pests as like an overarching term, but there's like fungicide, insecticide, herbicide, rodenticide, but they all sort of come into the same category of wanting to eliminate or kill this threat. Now, they sort of attack these threats in different ways. They could attack the nervous system or internal organs of these pests or rodents and stuff like that. These pesticides also cause what we call bioaccumulation, where these chemicals, this poison would accumulate in an insect or a rodent, for example, without killing it. And then a predator would come and eat this insect or rodent, and that poison would find itself in the food chain once again. And it would, after that, affect different animals in different ways. There was a big case where we noticed eggshells from different birds were extremely thin. And so it would cause the early death of certain species because of what we found out later was bioaccumulation of certain pesticides and poisons. But these chemicals also find themselves in waterways, or they travel by air to close fields. So humans are often in contact with pesticides through consuming foods, but also through consuming water, or even sometimes breathing it in. One of the pictures we have here is the algae issue, where when these pesticides and chemicals find themselves in static water, they'd often boost the population of algae, which would then sort of ruin biodiversity, because algae, like some of us probably know, covers the surface of the water, not allowing sun to get through. So any other plant that would be at the bottom of that waterway would eventually die off. Lastly, how are we doing on time right here? 12:20. There's a dangerous combination too that we see by sort of creating genetically modified plants that are resistant to these pesticides, that allow us to create even stronger pesticides so that these plants could resist, but everything around it, since they're not genetically modified, would die off. So it creates this vicious circle where we create resistant plants by GMOs, spray everything around it. But eventually we noticed, just like antibiotics, that nature would react and it would create stronger pests that are resistant to pesticides. So these pests would come back again. So what we do is create stronger pesticides and genetically modified crops that resist to those chemical products. So it creates, once again, this vicious cycle where we're dependent on seeds from these giant corporations and dependent on the pesticides, because we create these monster bugs that we don't have any other way to kill except for chemical products. There's also a colonial aspect to this, if I may, where we send off these seeds and products to the global south to help them with their production. And in time, we realize that these countries become dependent on our products and seed and chemicals because it ruins their land, takes away their ancestral means of working the soil and land. And so they're left with barren land, and all they could do is keep buying seeds that are extremely powerful and eat chemicals that come with it. So we're really sort of imposing this vicious cycle on nature where we're trying to counteract its obstacles that it's giving us by ways that we always sort of believe to be absolute, but then we realize that nature responds, always being a bit stronger. And so instead of being humbled by this, we sort of decide to just take up the fight and making stronger products, and then it comes up with even stronger pests. And it's sort of this vicious cycle that it long-term kind of ruins the land and makes it even harder for farmers to work the soil. You can go to the next slide and last slide. Thank you, Lena. So that's it. It's a very bleak subject when you're talking about like the introduction of chemicals and sort of those high-end genetically modified sciences into agriculture. It very rarely ends up in positive news, but there are a lot of sort of in response to this and as solutions, there's a lot of good news out there. For one, we noticed that when people stopped using antibiotics in their fields, well, first off, I've noticed it back home where farmers are just happier to not have to force a bunch of animals in small spaces. Farmers could be farmers again. It's often what's said. We feel a lot more happy about the work we do. So that's one thing. But also, if we stop using antibiotics, we notice that the superbug population actually decreases, as if there's no use for those super bugs anymore since there's no antibiotics for it. And so normal bug populations would come back. And the same goes for soil. If we stop using pesticides or chemicals like that, we notice that there's a way of working the soil to bring back actual natural soil life to it. So these cycles are sort of never lost, that balance that nature had before we introduced these highly intelligent means, say. This cycle comes back if we just work at it a little bit. And we're noticing this around the world where regenerative farming and like healthy farming is coming back, where people practice crop rotation and soil health and growing buddies and stuff like that. And these are all ways that we noticed are maybe not as may not be able to produce in massive scales like we're doing with like traditional conventional farms, but they're a lot healthier and they allow for a more long-term substitute to like chemical farming. Yeah, and essentially the philosophy of all of this to me is that we try to mold nature to our very capitalistic demands, and nature fought back. And we're learning that we have to step out of that back and forth fight with nature and sort of just listen to it instead and sort of use methods that guarantee harmony and long-term survival. And people are learning that. Science and traditional knowledge thought this and was teaching this a long time ago. So we're now becoming more and more accustomed to these new means. Yeah, so that I can stop there. I think it's been about like 15 minutes, right?
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. And now I'm just going to ask to stop recording because we're going into the writing workshop portion of the workshop. And this is going to